Hey everyone, welcome back to Heartcore, the human design podcast hosted by me, Celestina, and
Miko, hi everyone.
amazing. One day we'll get the gap between our introductions a little bit smaller. Until then, we'll have the awkward silence in between. I'm stoked about today's episode. We are talking about the planets in human design, and that can be seen on your chart. The little squares or little circles that flank your chart. Right on the right side, they'll all be black from top to bottom, and on the left side, they'll all be left from top to bottom. But before we get into planets today, Miko wants to talk to us a little bit about current planetary things. I was going to say alignments, but that's not the right word. Current planets and what is happening.
Thank you very much for the beautiful intro. And yes, one day we will close the gaps. Let's be honest. We're trying to cut them out every time though, so I'm not even sure the listener sees or hears these gaps. But
That's
today
fair.
the reason today the reason we decided to go into planets is because Mercury started retrograding a few days ago. Well, I think by now it's maybe a week ago. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I'm using my body graph to check the ephemeris. The ephemeris is where you can see the planets' transitions into different gates. And currently, we only have Mercury retrograding. It started on the 2nd of April in gate 3.1. And it's currently in gate 42.4. So as you can see, gate 3 is anyways being defined by the moon at the moment, but which transits very, very fast. But previously we had it defined from Mercury through its retrograde. It started in direct 3.1 and moved into retrograde on the 2nd of April into 3.1 and shifts backwards into 42.6 now. And as you can see, it's also the lines are declining if you're watching. So we started with 42.6 and are now at 42.4. So the lines, if you know, they are important. And they kind of give an additional flavor to the gate, an additional information to the gate. So when you're first looking at transits, we may be doing another episode on that, but when you're starting to look at transits, you first look at the sun and earth, and especially you can look at the gates, of course. You will see the energies of the sun are going to be different from the energies of the earth because they're polar opposites on the mandala. But the lines will be different, and the lines will give you the flair of the day. So you will recognize that when you're starting to use transits every day, you will recognize these energies in the population, and the gates will give you the flair as well of what is going on for that week, because the Earth and the Sun are approximately in one gate for approximately 1 week, a little less. And we decided to do this episode because of Mercury retrograde and everything that is being talked about regarding Mercury retrograde a lot of times. And as you may know, if you have gone through a few of them already, usually technology tends to glitch during this time. Mercury retrograde happens approximately 3 times a year, and you should also try to avoid traveling during this time. At least that's what's being said. And if you are traveling, then just be aware that things may take longer and things may not work out as planned. Another thing that can happen during Mercury retrograde is that exes come back into your life. They try to reach out to you, or maybe you're even reaching out to them, because this influences all of us. And when you're seeing the energies that are floating around, when you're understanding that, then you can simply become aware of it, and you may not want to reach for that phone. If you still feel like this is something you want to do, wait for Mercury retrograde to be over and even wait for its shadow to be over. So there's always a pre-shadow and a post-shadow to Mercury retrograde. Not sure it's even called a pre-shadow, but let's just go with it for now. Where you kind of have maybe 1 to 2 weeks before Mercury retrograde starts, that these energies are already kind of floating around. You're already going to feel Mercury retrograde coming up, and even post Mercury retrograde. So in this case, it will be over on the 25th, maybe 26th. Yeah, let's say 26th of April. That's when the Mercury retrograde will be over. Another thing that I did want to mention is that Pluto is going to step into gate 41, line 1 on the 12th of April. And this is going to be super, super significant because we are going to get a flare of 2027. And if you didn't know about 2027 yet, this is a huge shift in the human design eyes. We are already seeing the impact of 2027 where things are currently starting to crumble. Truths are coming to the surface or things are being unraveled. And now Pluto stepping into gate 41 is already kind of a little bit of a taste of what 2027 will feel like. We still haven't done an episode on 2027, and this is not the one that we're going to dive into. I just wanted you to become aware of that and to feel into what is going to happen from the 12th of April. And it's going to go until the 24th of May. So just feel into what that energy feels like. Maybe just observe for the time being and not try to use that energy yet. It also always has, it makes a difference whether or not you are connecting the other side of gate 41 or not. So if you do have gate 30, it may impact you more. If you do have gate 41, you kind of already feel the energy within you, and you're just going to get an additional push towards that energy. And this also happens during retrogrades. So I would like to point out here as well that when there is a planet retrograding in your chart, in your natal chart, you can see this in certain programs. However, you cannot see it in Maya Mechanics or mybodygraph.com. But what you can do is you can kind of use the daily transits, and you can put in the date for that transit for your time of birth, and you can check if your natal planets were retrograding. So the planets that you were, the conscious side of your human design chart, you can check whether there were retrogrades in there. And your unconscious side, you can check by typing in your design date of birth, and you will see whether or not there are planets retrograding in your chart. So this will provide you with some information regarding how you would feel in a retrograde. Because if there are planets retrograding in your chart naturally, then you may feel more aligned during retrogrades. Other people will feel less aligned during retrogrades when there is not. So let's just take Mercury as an example. If your Mercury in your natal chart or in your design chart is retrograding, you may feel more like yourself during this time period. And another thing that you can also always look at, so apart from looking at the current Mercury retrograde, so wherever it's retrograding in, whichever gate it's retrograding in, so at this point 42.4, you will take a look at that gate, whichever gate it's retrograding through, but you can also take a look at your personal Mercury and what that means for you. So Mercury is always also about communication. So you should try to avoid signing contracts during that time, or really take a lot of time going through it meticulously, because communication can be a bit wonky. And also when you're having conversations with someone, try to push these conversations into a later time, unless your Mercury is naturally retrograding, then maybe this is the time for you to have these conversations. However, bear in mind that the other person may still be influenced by that. So this is just things that you need to experiment with and see how it goes, see how you feel. And when you're looking at your own personal Mercury definition, you will see where you may face challenges if you don't have a natural retrograde in your chart, or where you may feel more comfortable during Mercury retrograde to express yourself. So these are just a few things regarding Mercury retrograde. We're not going to get into the other planets retrograding and what that means for you, but these are just Mercury related things that can come up, which is communication, transportation, exes coming back into your life, and signing contracts. These are things that you should look out for when it comes to Mercury retrograde. But this episode, we're now going to be diving into each individual planet and what that means.
All right. So I feel like the big distinction in the human design space is that, yes, the sun and the earth are probably the two most important to look at, right? Because they comprise the two on your personality side and the two on your design side comprise your incarnation cross, which we've discussed is your life's purpose. However, in addition to like the typical astrological planets that we're talking about, we also bring in the north and south nodes. And those, I think, I found them to be most interesting in my chart, right? Like, we'll get into what each of these are in just a little bit, but that's where I had some aha moments when I was revisiting all of these the last couple of days. So let's start at the top, whether you are looking at your conscious side or unconscious side, right? So the black side, the personality side of your chart, or the unconscious side, the design side of your chart, the red side, these will still have the same meanings. It just depends on if you're looking at your birth date or 88 to like 90-ish days before your birth date, which is your design date, right? So like that's how we're seeing both of these. And that's, as Miko said, that's where the planets were on each of those days respectively. So we're going to start at the top, going through each of the planets and then the nodes respectively as well, and kind of just taking a little bit more of a dive into each. So the sun is at the top, and consider this to be your life's purpose, right? So it's going to be the main energy that you are here to explore as a human and that you're here to express, especially through that conscious side. So your conscious sun is said to be about 70% of what comprises your design, which is extremely significant in who you are as a human. I did a kind of a deep dive, not even a deep dive, I just did a dive into mine today, and my conscious sun is in gate 45.6, and this is the gatherer. If you guys have seen my chart on past episodes, it's hilarious, but also not, because this is the only channel that I have, and this is the only conscious part of that full channel, so this is literally my life's purpose of being able to give people the resources that they need and really lean into that piece of it. I guess other pieces of this, of the conscious sun aspect of this, so the sixth line of the 45 is being a natural born leader, but also really wanting to take care of the tribe. And I was looking also into I have notes from a past reading that I've had, the high and low expressions of this gate. We could probably just do a whole episode on all of that, so I won't get into it. But I was reading those two, and I was like, oh my God, dude, the tribe and like the conforming, I think, that I expect of other people when they come into my world is so intense and kind of ingrained in me that I'm now hindsight recognizing that if I've made the incorrect decision of bringing someone into my world, that I become frustrated, almost angry. I'm not going to say always angry, but almost angry if they're not meeting expectations that I've set for them. So I just found that to be really interesting and kind of eye-opening looking at the conscious sun, but really bringing it back to just having the resources to give to the people that I need and feeling supported by them and supporting them. So I highly recommend you guys starting here. If the other planets are overwhelming, or if you don't have time to go deeper into your personal chart at this point in time, if you can just look at your conscious sun and also subsequently the line that is associated with your conscious sun, because as Miko pointed out before, the lines just bring greater nuance into it, right? So, for example, reading the line 6 of Gate 45 for myself, an outsider can admit that its prior rejection was an error and will generally be accepted into the gathering. Right? So this kind of illuminates what I just said earlier, right? If someone's not necessarily a good fit for the tribe, I may or may not excommunicate them. And that could have been from a poor decision initially. But yeah, so I think just looking into this can be really insightful. Thoughts on this before I continue to ramble in a circle?
No, well done. I would just like to add a little bit about the sun. And as Celestina already mentioned, it's definitely a huge chunk of who you are and also how you shine your light. So this is kind of what the sun is all about. You shine your light through a specific way. However, you're only going to be able to do that when you're grounding into your earth. So we're going to get that, of course, after the sun, because we're definitely looking at the first. These are the first two most important planets. They provide 70% of the information about you. I do think, of course, that the other planets play a huge role into the rest of your chart and how those 70% are played out, basically. But they do make up a great deal of your chart. And I also differentiate between design and personality sun. Also from the aspect that the design side is always connected to your physical body, while the personality or the black side is always connected to your personality. And in this case, the sun is in its unconscious side. It's about your physical expression. How, like, there's a word in German that is called Ausstrahlung, which I find beautiful, but I can't find the word in English for it. It's more than appearance. It's the way that you physically show up and the way that people physically recognize you, as in the glow inside of you. So this is really about how you show up physically, maybe also how you dress yourself. And it's also something that people pick up more about you. So outsiders will pick up this side a lot about you, because the design side is always what others see a lot in you, what your family members see a lot in you, and it's unconscious to you. So it's something that you may not realize as much, but others will. Whereas the personality side is what you strongly usually see in yourself. That's how you often identify yourself, by looking or by understanding the personality first, and only later on understanding your unconscious aspects. So it kind of also goes back to many psychological theories or therapists. Of course, they say it's unconscious. There's a reason why it's called unconscious. But we can become conscious of it, and we do become conscious of it the more that we use self-discovery techniques, self-reflective techniques, and the willingness to always grow and evolve always helps to dive deeper into it. So yeah, the conscious aspect is really about how you shine your life, shine your light, and it's about your life mission. And yeah, it's just a slight difference, but one is how you shine your light in your personality, and the other one is how you shine your light in your physical appearance. And some planets are going to be a bit deeper in their differences between personality and design, and others are going to be more subtle, like the sun, for example.
My unconscious sun just to use this as an example, and I would love for you to use yours as an example for Earth. But my unconscious sun is in gate 36.2, which, again, diving deeper into it again, I was telling Miko that I had a reading, and these notes are from 2021, but I feel like now putting them together with the understanding and meaning of the planets, that it just has. And also, I'm deeper into my Saturn return, so I think I'm just having a different understanding of this and a different perspective of all of this. But gate 36.2 is hitting differently now, reading it, having gone through various experiences over the last quarter of this year. So this gate is needing support, but also being able to apply what I'm feeling and what I've experienced into crisis situations and help transform like the environment or the people like throughout that area and time of crisis, right? So it's really interesting to kind of see that play out in my real world, even if it's like she just said, right? Not something that I'm conscious or necessarily conscious of, but possibly have become more conscious of over the past couple of years. So it's interesting to be able to see how that plays out. And maybe that also is related to why I had a heart pull towards the current position that I'm in. I didn't understand it when I was like in the thick of it, 2 or 3, even a month into the job. But I think now having a little bit more perspective and feeling supported on both ends, like from those above me and those below me, I'm seeing the gift, like my gift come into play, which is really cool. So again, explore both the conscious and unconscious sides of your sun. It'll probably, even if it's not something that you're like aha momenting about now, it could be something in the future that you can reflect back on and be like, oh wow, that's where that came into play. So give that a noodle.
Yeah, I also like how you pull the comparison to your current life and how it starts to make sense when you're going through your chart. It's always such a fascinating thing to do, especially when you're then a little deeper into it, to also take into consideration, as Celestina mentioned, the Saturn return, for example, because they do also influence you. It doesn't mean that you're changing your design or you're becoming something different, but it does influence you. And to understand these parts of your current life cycle as well, this can just also be a solar return, so just what the year brings. But understanding these aspects is also yet another layer that we can add to it and just brings much more clarity. So one other thing to bear in mind is that the influence of the planets that are currently transiting into gates, it has an impact on every single one of us. It's not just the impact that it has on you and yourself, but it also, of course, impacts everyone. However, when you are aware of it, you can do something about it. You can be proactive about it, and you don't have to be sucked into it. So that is why it's so fascinating to get into the daily transits or to just understand at least what is happening during the week, because whatever planet is transiting, especially the sun and the earth, that's also going to impact us most. The slower the planets move, the more it's a generational impact or a collective impact. And then there are certain planets that are more personal and other planets that are just more collective in its nature and its impact. So when it comes to human design, it's important to understand your own chart and also what is going on around you. So it's kind of this deconditioning part as well. The reason why everyone always says in human design that it's important for you to sleep in your own aura and to have some time alone is because this will help you understand how the planets are influencing you. It will help you understand who you truly are and differentiate these two aspects, because when then other people are also coming into play, things just become even more complex, because this way you can at least look at the transits of the planets and you can kind of understand, okay, this is the energy that I'm getting from the current sun placement or solar placement, the current lunar placement, the current Plutonian placement, like things like this. It's going to help you just understand it more easily. But when another person enters your aura, you don't always know their charts. So you don't always know how they're influencing you and what you're feeling. And that's why diving into your own chart, diving into the ephemeris or the transits, the daily transits or the weekly transits is going to help you. As an example, we're going to take a look at the planet Earth now. So when it comes to how you shine your light, you first kind of have to be grounded. You have to be grounded into the Earth. So this is what planet Earth is about. The personality side is going to help you ground your mind, your mental aspects, and the design side of your Earth is going to help you ground your physical body and physical elements within your chart. So in my case, for example, I have the 39.6 in my Earth, and that has to do with provocation. So let's just assume that this is the current transit, and currently gate 39 is defined by, let's say, the sun at the moment. Then people may be going around feeling this energy, feeling the need to provoke. There are also different lines in this as well. So I have line 6, so it's about being a troubleshooter, a problem solver. But it always, as Celestina has already mentioned, it always has an exaltation and it has a detriment. So exaltation is when the arrow is pointing up. In this case, there is no fixedness in this gate, so it is either or. I can maybe feel sometimes like I'm exalted, other times like I'm a detriment. And what Ra always loves to point out when it comes to this, it's not about good or bad, it's about this or that. So it is just yet another energy. So even if you have gates in detriment, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just part of you, and it's a different way of expression in this gate, or in this line more like, which of course also influences the gate. But as you can see here, the main theme of this gate is about provoking. So it's pointing towards the emotional solar plexus. However, you can provoke someone in a negative way, in a low way, and this is not connected to detriment and exaltation. It is just that you can be very mean and evil in provoking people's reactions, because it's kind of the testing of, is this person really for me? So this is what this provocation is about. You kind of poke, and especially if you're in your shadow, you're really poking in a nasty, evil way, and you also tend to push people away from you. So it kind of leads to a provocation which is really unhealthy and pushing people away, whereas in your healthy expression, it is more about pushing people and triggering something out of them, seeing where their wounds are still residing, but to help them heal out of it. So kind of to help them see, okay, hey, this is something that you still need to work on. It also works the other way. So in this case, I can also, of course, get provoked and also provoke myself to see where I still have wounds to heal from. And I do that also through other people. So I kind of try to understand, okay, what is something that I still need to work on. But if this is the energy that is floating around in the universe currently, then it may be that people are really provoking you and pushing you, and they may be expressing the shadow aspect of it. So they may be really mean and nasty about it, and they have no idea what is going on if they're not into these kinds of things. So it may just come out in a bad way, but if you're aware of it, you can do something about it, and you don't have to let yourself be pulled into that energy. Just bear in mind that when it comes to planet Earth, it's about grounding yourself and finding the healthy expression of these gates, and you can do that through gene keys, for example, where you can find the shadow aspect, where you can also find the reactive and the repressed aspect of the shadow, and then you will see the light aspect, so the gift aspect, and you will see the mastery, the siddhi of this gate, which is usually relatively unattainable. It's like reaching enlightenment in a gate, but it's still something to read through, to understand. I highly, highly recommend it. It's going to provide you with so much more insights regarding yourself, and to me, it helped me understand how I was as a teenager, and I was a very, very provocative teenager, really poking a lot and reacting a lot. So it's very helpful to do that. And the personality earth is about grounding your mind. The design earth is about grounding your body. So really look into these things, especially if you do have some physical challenges or mental challenges, how you can ground yourself and feel more stable in your life. Would you like to add something?
That was fantastic. The only other note that I have about conscious earth and then subsequently unconscious earth. So my understanding is that the conscious earth is like the main challenge that you will continue to encounter over and over again. In particular, when you're like in a phase of life where you're leveling up. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are experiencing challenges around this gate in the interim, or if you have in the past. I'm all about some reflection. So if you hear me talking about in the past a lot, that's also part of my chart. All right. So, and then the unconscious earth piece of it, think about this as being like what to ground into at every new level, right? So versus the conscious earth, it's the challenges that you may meet, but the unconscious earth, it's like bringing it back to finding that balance, to finding that stability in whatever you're doing next and whatever that new level is. So it's kind of this recommitment to that next level and to the purpose of that next level.
Very nice. Thank you. And now that you mentioned that, I didn't also mention that regarding the sun aspect, but when you're looking at your unconscious aspects, it always is connected to your ancestors as well in your entire chart. So it kind of goes 5 generations back into the chart. And what is said is that the sun aspect, the unconscious sun, represents an aspect that comes from your dad, your father, and the unconscious earth is an imprint from your mom. So that's also something that you may want to just dabble with and see how that fits into the picture. Would you like to start with the nodes?
I'm a north node and south node simultaneously because I feel like they definitely go hand in hand. The north node is what you're moving forward towards. So the future direction of a life theme that begins around 40. Whereas the south node is something that you're typically moving away from, obviously depending on age, right? But think of it as an energy that you master or that you're comfortable with earlier in life, and that you're kind of moving away towards, like, as you rise up in years towards 40. So it's kind of putting you on a different life path, right? Like in your 30s, which is, it's so interesting that this coincides with 30s, because I feel like in your 20s, it's like the figure it out and fuck around kind of stage. And people are just like, oh my God, your 30s are amazing. And then people in their 40s are like, oh my God, your 40s are amazing. And I feel like the north and south nodes actually speak to that.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of, I mean, it's also kind of the midlife crisis shift. So we do talk a lot about midlife crisis in just a regular way. Everyone knows what the midlife crisis is about, but this actually explains it. So it's not necessarily just connected to this. It's also regarding the Uranus opposition. So that and also the Chiron return. So if you're a 6 line, often the midlife crisis happens around Chiron return. So this is where you shift from the roof down back to planet Earth, basically, reconnecting with everyone around you. We have talked about the sixth line in the profiles. So if you want to, in the profiles episode, so if you want to check that out, then go back to that episode and listen in. But with people that are not necessarily a sixth line, it often happens around the Uranus opposition, and that's around 40. It can be a bit earlier, it can be a bit later. Some people say it's around 50s, so it really depends which one is impacting you more. It doesn't necessarily have to only impact a sixth line. It can also, like the Chiron return can also happen and impact people that don't have a sixth line, but that have a lot of sixth lines in their human design chart. So again, it always depends what your whole chart looks like. But planetarily or universally, looking at the planets, basically, you can see that midlife crisis does have an impact. And the North Node and South Node does show this shift of around 40s, as Celestina mentioned, where before 40s, you have the South Node impacting you, and after 30s, it's the North Node that is more of an impact. So it's kind of what you're moving towards. And it's also providing you with an insight into how your environment shifts. So it's one providing you with a direction in life, but it also shows you how your environment is going to shift and what you're going to learn in this new type of environment. The nodes are just a calculation. It's not actually a physical object. It's a calculation connected to the moon, and it's a very tricky, how to say that? It's a very tricky aspect in the chart, in my opinion, because it has a lot of complexity. And I think we should actually do a whole separate episode on the nodes by themselves because it is very, very complex. But for now, just know that also within a year, so when you're looking at a solar return, for example, the year is divided into two halves, where the North Node and the South Node are going to provide different aspects within the year. The North Node is the second half of the year, and the South Node is the first half of the year. And that just is the same thing with a life cycle as well. In your birth chart, it's something that you're moving more towards one or the other. And just like the Earth, they're always on the opposite side of things. So the Sun and the Earth are always on the opposite side of each other. The nodes are also, North Node and South Node are also always on the opposite side of each other. The interesting aspect about the nodes as well is that they're pretty much always retrograding. They're moving towards the other side of the chart. So when you're looking at Sun and Earth, they're moving counterclockwise. Let's see if I'm getting that right. They're moving counterclockwise. And the nodes are moving clockwise. So they're always retrograding, but sometimes they go direct. But in your natural chart, that's the complex thing about it. It's basically their natural movement is retrograde. There you go. So it's also a fascinating aspect regarding the nodes. But yeah, just a little bit about them. And I think now, if you have anything else to add regarding the nodes.
We're going to be here forever if I keep interjecting about my chart. So I think we just have to do a completely separate episode on the nodes, and I will share my insights there.
Ooh, perfect. I like it. Yeah, that's a very huge and complex topic. So let's move to the moon. The moon in the unconscious aspect, so in your design side, it's about your emotional why. So this is your reason why you wake up in the morning. Let's go back here to a person's chart so you can see. So the unconscious aspect is about why and why you wake up in the morning, whereas the conscious aspect is about what your thoughts and actions are focused upon. And it also shows you what you need to feel emotionally secure. So take a look at your chart and dive into what that may mean for you. And for me, this is the main aspects about the moon, but maybe you have another insight into it. What else you would like to share regarding
this was really interesting when I was looking at mine today. Again, guys, like, I've glossed over this in the past, but I'm just in this time of my life where things are just making sense. So I am going to share a wee bit real quick. So my moon is in 14.3. Gate 14 is the possession in great measure. And the line 3 aspect of it is about service. So the utilization of talent and wealth for the highest good. It's so interesting. I don't know if that's literally my reason that I wake up in the morning, but I think the verbiage around it is very interesting because this stems back to like giving people the resources that they need. So I think that that's really interesting that it kind of all ties back into being a leader that really actually cares about the people that they're leading. So just wanted to toss that out there.
Absolutely. And also, now that I'm thinking about the moon, it has a feminine aspect. It's one of the very few planets in the traditional human design planets, where you have this feminine aspect to it. You also have that in Venus, of course. And some people are a bit mixed about it regarding the moon, but I think to me it is very sensitive, it's very receptive, it's very feminine in its nature. And that's also why I personally love to use asteroids, because it gives it provides more insights regarding the feminine. Because if you do look at human design planets, it is very male oriented, the main planets. So the next one we're going to be talking about is, let's see, which one would you like to talk about next? Mercury?
Let's go in the order of the thing that I have right here, Mercury.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So
let's go with Mercury.
Mercury is basically what you're here to communicate. It is the message of your soul and what it wants to share within your lifetime, which I think is just so beautiful, right? Talking about leaning into a little bit more of the feminine, that to me feels like a girl weekend, like kvetch sesh or like crying sesh, just all of that. You're going to be able to go way more into it than I am. Oh, you want to talk about mine? Okay. I didn't even see it up on the screen. Yeah, sure. Let's roll into that. So my Mercury is in 52.3. So interesting. It's keeping still and self-imposed inaction for the benefit of assessment. So remember when I was talking before about doing all of the like introspection? I feel like there have been times of my life, like significant periods of my life, where not doing anything and thinking about things in the past have been extremely insightful. So I would love to know how this shows up for you and what gate this is in for you as well, Miko.
Mine, and also going back to yours really quickly, it's also in your south node, in your design south node. So when you were talking about it, and you were talking about it in the past, I mean, of course you can't really talk about it, what's going to happen in the future, but it's going to be a significant part of your life, and especially how you ground your physical body, or how you find stability in your physical body up to the age of approximately 40, maybe mid 40s or 50s, something like this, but probably more around 40 with the north and south node. So I found that very interesting that you were just mentioning that. Yeah. Regarding my Mercury, it's in my head, in my open or undefined head, in the 61.2. And that means that I want to communicate about things in my personality, at least in my conscious communication. I really want to communicate about things that inspire me and inspire others. And it's about because I have an undefined head, so it's really collecting all the informations out there, and I do that so much. I just love to get inspired by others and to share what I found. So my program Opportunity is also about having thousands of different tools and techniques and methods and ideas from other people, which I also openly share. I don't say, hey, I invented anything, because I don't believe I invented anything. I just accumulated many things and created this program. And that to me is the magic, to share what I have found from others and making it my own by combining all of these things. So also that's why I find it so fascinating to combine ancient wisdom and modern science. I take both because I believe that there is magic in both and importance in both, to not disregard what our ancestors have done and to also not disregard what science is finding out, at least in certain aspects. I just think that both have aspects that need to be looked at and need to be understood. However, I do tend to lean more towards ancestral wisdom, because I think science is very much focused on what they can see and feel and hear, and so basically using your five senses. Whereas I believe that there is much more beyond the five senses that we have. There is things that we can't scientifically prove yet, and quantum physics, that's why it's so fascinating to me, because it's kind of going into that direction. And it kind of takes things into account that traditional science is not yet taking into account. But yeah, so as you can see, Gate 61 in my personality is definitely a big thing for me, whereas Gate 44 is in my unconscious Mercury. So what that means is that the conscious side of Mercury is what your mind enjoys thinking about and what you enjoy talking about. And it's also what you need to talk about to feel heard or to be heard. The unconscious aspect of your Mercury is what you communicate non-verbally to the world. So this is kind of, it's the marketing aspect. To me, I'm not a very good marketing person, actually, but I think when I do speak about things that fascinate me, so in this aspect, when I would lean into my 61, and I do lean into it when I'm talking about things on Inside Timer or, for example, on here, when people see me, they unconsciously do feel the trust and the marketing side of things, being able to sell myself, but I don't actually actively do it. I just speak and I just share, and that's how I market myself. So it's the unconscious Mercury is about how you non-verbally communicate things to the world. It's about, again, this Ausstrahlung, this physical appearance or this physical glow. And it is something that you may accidentally be talking about because it's subconscious. So take a look at your Mercury and see what that does for you. Would you like to add something about Mercury? Okay, but then let's move to the next one.
I'm your Venus, I'm your fire, you're the fire. I had to.
Love it.
So Venus is about your values and really grounding into what represents your morals, how you deal with others, and the world around you as well. This one, dude, so I love a good, asking people what their values are, because I really feel like that brings so much insight into them as a human. Whether someone actually knows what their values are, though, I find to be lacking sometimes. So it's really interesting to be able to read what your inherent values are in your chart if you find yourself to be someone who struggles to determine what your values are. And funny enough, my conscious Venus is in 45.6 as well. So you know I'm all about gathering people around some good food, some good wine, and hanging out.
That sounds very right. That's her thing. And she even, as I said, I mean, I mentioned this in another episode, but she does carry stuff for you when she knows that you become hangry very quickly. So yeah, that would be me. My guiltiness when I am hungry, I need food, and I don't really get hangry, but I get uncomfortable. And in order to avoid that, I also try to just provide for myself when Celestina is not around. But people then see that as egoistic, and I'm like, no, I'm doing everyone around me a favor by eating, trust me. So, a little bit about that. Regarding your Venus, yes, absolutely one of my favorite things to do, and also how I start my program when I'm working with clients, is definitely having them figure out their values first, their top 3 values to be precise. I mean, you can also already do that with human design by looking at your Venus. What are your values regarding the Venus placement? And you will see. So the fascinating thing about human design, again, is that you don't need to know it, but you need to be deconditioned. And when you're deconditioned, and that's, most of us aren't, like 99.99999% of the population is probably not deconditioned. Okay, let's not make that number that high. But it's very difficult to decondition yourself when you're being taught from the get-go what to eat, what to do, which life path to take, what your society is thinking about you, and how you should be mindful of that. And we are really very conditioned from the get-go. If you're lucky, you had parents that were trying to do that less and less and giving you the freedom of really truly being yourself. But most of us didn't have that luck. I thankfully feel like I did have that luck. But even then, parents are always influencing you in some ways, and the culture around you is always influencing you. So really sitting down and figuring out what are your values is so important, and not what are the values and ideals of everyone around you. And that can be already a very difficult thing. So this is also in your conscious, in your personality Venus. It is also how you often view the female gender, and it shows the individuals that we resonate with physically. So looking at your Venus can really provide you a lot of insights in this as well. And it also shows you the topic that we are yearning to feel accepted. So Venus in your personality is really showing you what you want to be appreciated for. Celestina just helped me with the grammar there. Thank you very much. But we probably cut that out.
What's interesting though is that you have a defined ajna and you can actually think through this, right? And like the values aspect of it. Coming from a different perspective of someone who does not have a defined ajna, I find it really challenging to think through and identify what my values are. So just give that a noodle too.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think you're maybe right. So the way that I have worked around that aspect in my program is that I basically provided a list of potential values. And you kind of have to go through that list, and you have to say which ones you feel like you possess and which ones you want to have in the future. And then you kind of have to narrow it down by comparing it. So you go to the first value that you've crossed and marked, and then you kind of compare it to the second value, and you say, okay, which one is more important? And then you focus on the next one and compare those two. Okay, from the first one that I chose was more important, which one of those two is more important? And then you kind of go through the list. And I feel like this helped to narrow it down even for people that don't have a defined ajna as well, because we're trying to go into the emotional aspect of it. So with a defined ajna, it's the mental process. But what I want to understand and really figure out is the values that you emotionally connect with, or that you're feeling wise connecting with. So this would be connected not to the emotional solar plexus, but it would be connected to your inner authority.
That makes sense. Cool. Thank you.
Let's see. We should do that with you and see if you can narrow it down by using this technique. So maybe it's still a challenge. I don't know. It's a good point, I think. And that also always goes back to human design. It's an experiment, and we really need to also figure out how it works for us. So I think that's a valid and good point to make. When it comes to your design Venus, it's the aspect that governs the morals of your relationships. So what guides your relationships? So where the personality is more about your mental values, as we just talked about, regarding a defined ajna maybe. The design Venus is more about the physical morals, of course, and when it comes to relationships, the physical morals becomes important in romantic relationships, because that's where two beings connect physically as well. So it's about your physical pleasures and enjoyments as well. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your Venus, your design Venus. Would you like to add something to that? Okay, then let's move to...
I don't have a song for this.
Oh.
Anyway, well, we're going to move to Mars. What I found interesting is that this is an area of potential immaturity, right? So it could be a passion, desire, and aggression, but it's definitely an area where there could be a lot of learning, or you could just be a fool. So, a very interesting aspect to, let's say, absorb. That's not right. Look into. There we go. I don't have a thesaurus next to me, so that's the word. That's the verbiage we're going to use.
So if you've been watching, you may have noticed a glitch here. If not, if you've just been listening, you probably didn't, because that was Celestina talking, and you can only see it on the video. I'm sure. I don't know. I haven't looked at it yet, but Mercury hit us. And of course it did. I mean, who does that? Who records a podcast episode during Mercury retrograde while one person is on the entire opposite side of the planet? We do.
We're fools. But it's okay, because I think this also just re-solidifies how it can affect you. So be smart, guys. Don't do that.
Or at least be okay with things like this happening. So we have made a decision in that short little period of time that we are going to split this episode in half, because it's also going to be a very long episode if we continue through the entire list of planets. And we decided to therefore stop after Mars and continue our part 2 of the planets with, I think it's Jupiter that's coming next.
Tis Jupiter. Tis
Perfect.
Jupiter.
So as you can see, these are also the planets that are personally connected to you, whereas the next planets we're going to be talking about, which is why it's, of course, a perfect break provided by the universe, that the next planets are generational planets. So these are more broad picture, broader influences. It's not as connected to you, however, they of course still are, but the influence is it's a little bit less. So Mars, as Celestina already mentioned, is she used a perfect word which I can't come up with right now. Yeah, it's an immature planet, as in you really have to grow into this planet. It's not something that you will have access to from the get-go. It's something that you kind of have to play around with. I always compare it to the Fool's Journey in the tarot. So if you use the tarot, you can see that the first card, or I think card 0 even, well, the Fool is the first card in the tarot deck, and it's kind of the journey of the Fool that you're going through in the major arcanas. And the whole journey is a bit just being naive and playing around, but eventually you kind of grow into the Mars energy. You are starting to understand what it's about. You've done your trials and errors, and you will understand how to use it more effectively. So on the personality side, it's something that you kind of have to learn to take. It's also a creativity that resides in you, and it needs to gain the tolerance of others. So it is definitely a talent that you have, but it needs to evolve during your lifetime. On the unconscious side of things, I like to dive into the lines, because definitely the lines. I mean, I like to do that in every planet, but in Mars, it will reveal your trauma. So we have Chiron, which is the wounded healer, and Mars also reveals part of your childhood trauma. So when you're looking at the different lines, you will understand what your personal trauma is, and you will understand how to work through those traumas. But I would like to also do a separate episode on that. Cliffhanger, yeah. Because as you know by now, we love to dive into the shadows, and we're probably going to want to do a inner child wound episode, something along those lines, and probably pull up some charts where we see some challenges. So I think that would be very interesting. And in the unconscious design, so your unconscious Mars, it's your talent resides in this deep trauma or injury. So you first have to learn how to heal it before you can kind of imagine like a little oyster where you have this pearl inside, but unless you manage to open this oyster and reveal that pearl, and that by that I mean that you need to kind of heal your trauma before that oyster opens up, because otherwise you stay clamped up like an oyster if you don't heal that trauma, and if you want to keep protecting that inner shell of yours. So you really need to heal your trauma first before that talent that resides within you is shown to the world.
Yeah. Any insights on your end about your either conscious or unconscious Mars? Were you immature, boo?
Oh, I'm sure I find something here. There we go. That's my conscious aspect that I'm immature about security. I don't really feel like I'm immature about that. Well, I was maybe. The connection on establishing a strong foundation. Yeah, see, you have a projector here who hasn't really looked deeply into her chart. I should really connect with that other person that has the identical chart to mine again, so that I can go through her chart, basically. So
I don't think you've ever talked about her here, but Miko found her human design twin across the world. And now you can just look at her chart for insights.
Exactly. So yeah, by accident, quote unquote, because there are no accidents, I found my human design twin on TikTok, and I just started to share a lot of things on TikTok, and I have since stopped. Not because of her, but because I went to Saudi Arabia, and I entered the dry kitchen environment, and mine is wet kitchens. So somehow I feel like that had a huge impact, also because I was working on something else there. But this video was the one that I shared on TikTok with my chart, was watched maybe by 300 people, maybe 400. And you know how it is. So it may just have been people swiping through it. So you can't really even count that. And then one person reached out to me and she said, "Hey, you are sharing my chart. You're talking about my chart." And I said, "No, I'm pretty sure I'm not." And I was just thinking, okay, she probably has no idea about human design. She just saw the centers that are defined and then she kind of came to the conclusion that this is her chart without looking at the gates and stuff like that. And then she shared her chart immediately after that. I just looked at it and I was like, oh my God, it has the same lines in every single gate. There's only, when you're entering into the color tones and bases, there are only a very few planets, planetary placements, where one of these elements changes. And it's usually really just the tones or the bases that change. And not even all of them. So that to me was really crazy. And we did end up talking on the phone and discussing how our life kind of went from childhood to now. And we have a lot of similarities. And we had decided to dive deeper into it, but we kind of lost touch for the last few months, but we're going to do that. And I'm also going to ask her if she would like to join this podcast at some point so that we could just talk about that.
Can we call that episode 2 Miko's 1 Shell?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, maybe we do that. So that would give us the opportunity to each dive into the other's chart. Because yes, we, as projectors, we're known to not really dive deeply into our personal charts, but because we learn through the other a lot. And this is not an excuse, please. I don't ever try to make excuses when it comes to why I do or don't do things. It just gives me a better understanding of why I do and don't do things. Also regarding the environment that I'm now in Saudi Arabia, which is dry kitchens. It's extremely hot. It's in the middle of the desert. But I just feel the impact of it. It makes a difference and I find it interesting. And I try to still sometimes push through it, but in some cases it would just be better to become aware of it and then let it go, be okay with it, and change the things that you can change instead of just working like a maniac to try to go against the flow. So I don't think that human design should ever be used as an excuse. It's just there to kind of understand yourself better, to make better choices for yourself as well, even though I do believe that this was the completely right choice to make. And it was also limited to a time frame. So that's why I decided to still move ahead with it. And all of that to say, my personality Mars, the gate of power skills, and here you can see it's in detriment. So the detriment is overconfidence in meeting the challenges of competition that may threaten the very basis of security. Without the proper skills, the inability to guarantee security. And I do feel like I really need that. And I've grown through it. So I need some kind of a solid foundation. And line 4 is the lowest of the upper trigram. So it does need a solid foundation to build. And it's a bit connected to line 1. I mean, they are connected in that aspect, that they do need a solid foundation. And I do need to understand something properly before I feel confident enough to share it. As Celestina knows, I do need a certain structure. So here you can see maybe some part of where it's from, but it's just something that I had to grow into and learn and understand. And the other aspect is gate 46, and that is connected to the physical body, which is also in detriment. But it's basically treating your body like a temple, really taking care of your physical body. And this is also definitely 100% something that I had to grow into. I was treating my body, I don't want to say that word, but I was treating it really badly.
Like shit.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, you did it. You said it. So basically, I was treating it badly. And, but yeah, her word matches it much better than mine, because I was drinking a lot, I was smoking a lot. I smoked a pack a day back in the day for I think 8 years. I started really early. I don't consider myself that I was an alcoholic, but I was drinking a lot of alcohol. I was pushing the boundaries when it came to driving cars and motorbikes, and I felt like the biggest adrenaline junkie ever out there. And it was, yeah. So in detriment, it is a tendency through projection to treat a potential future as the present, leading to unjustified egoism and the loss of momentum and support. The determination to treat a projected success as a reality. I am currently, now that I'm reading that, not sure where I would have projected into something like that, but because I know that this gate is very much connected to the body, the physical body, and because it is in my design Mars, I think it is very strongly connected to that, and it's also connected to the trauma of Sirius. And this is something that I do struggle with. It's something that I do have a tendency to fall into, to be very serious and very collected and very, some people would say I'm maybe not fun, or they don't see that. And this is generally a big theme in my life, where I need to bring this joy, this happiness, this creativity, this laughter. I need to bring this into my life also because I have this in my conscious earth and conscious sun. So this is a big aspect regarding especially the conscious sun, the fighter, the gate of the fighter. It needs to be connected to this lightness and this happiness. So
what I'm hearing is less German, more French. That's what I'm hearing. Le joie de vivre.
La joie de vivre. Yes, exactly. It has to. And I think this is also a reason why I try to be a bit more connected to kids in some ways. So I'm not someone that necessarily says, I want kids. It's not something I've ever said. But now with my current partner, I can really imagine having it. It's something that, because of him and his support, I can imagine being able to do that. And he has 2 kids. So to me, a lot of people may see this as a challenge. They may say, I don't know if I can be with someone that already has 2 kids. And to me, it's a really amazing gift, because being surrounded by kids, it gives you this lightness. They still see the world in a certain way. They still have that innately in them. And while I can maybe teach them some things, they will be teaching me a lot about this aspect, and also many more aspects. Kids always teach you so much about yourself, and they push all the buttons that they can, especially when it's your own. But I think this is an important part of my life journey to just step more into that aspect of life again.
So gain the maturity around it. Love that for you. Cool. Well, guys, an hour and a half into this, hopefully you gained some amazing insights into your individual planets. When we come back at you guys next time, we'll be diving more so into the generational planets. And I think that'll allow you to have some more connection to your peers and a greater understanding of, I find myself saying it now too, but like, I don't understand Gen Zers, right? And that has a lot to do with like the generational planets. So I'm really excited to dive into this as well, so that we can just gain better perspectives and better understandings of others in the world around us, rather than feeling like we have to be like boomers sitting on their porches being like, well, back in my day, right? Because yeah, it was different back in your day. But I think if we gain more perspective of it, it's just helpful for all of us. So, any last wrap-up words you got?
Oh, I loved your words. I don't even want to add to that, except for thank you very much for listening. We appreciate you, and that you tune in if this is your first time, and tune in every time again if you are a reoccurring listener.
Your video went out like 5 minutes ago or like 5 seconds ago. Anyway. All right, guys, if you haven't already, leave a review for the show. You can also interact with some of the episodes that we post on Spotify, so feel free to do so there as well. We love interacting. So have an amazing day, an amazing week, and we'll see you guys next week. Ciao.
Bye, everyone.